Hi there. It's my pleasure to introduce the arts, science, and culture session of today's conference. Sometimes you get some really cool stuff when you mix the arts and sciences. Art and science can be a bit like lovers with very different backgrounds, but when they do get it together, the offspring come out vibrant and supercharged. We believe amazing projects like these next three can open up some of the research being done to a much broader audience. And with that in mind, please let me introduce you to the three talks. We have Arachnophilia with Markus Buehler, Tomas Saraceno, and Evan Ziporyn. I hope I got the names right. The second talk is Do Bees Like Van Gogh's Sunflowers from Lars Chittka from Queen Mary University of London. And finally, from Clare Brooks of Google Arts and Culture and the artist Cristina Tarquini, Art, Emotion and Ecology, the Heartbeat of the Earth. So please, Markus, would you take us away?
Great, thank you so much, Peter, and great to meet you all. An amazing conference. I've been enjoying the talks this morning. So our contribution will be discussing our work on spider webs, and we have three speakers, but this is part of a very large team, I would say, international team of many folks. My graduate student, Isabel Su, who's traveling today and couldn't join, unfortunately, Ian Hedwig, Christine Southworth, Tomas, Evan, who you'll meet later again, and many others actually who have worked on this in the studio and at MIT over the years. And the project is focused on spider webs and looking to spider webs for inspiration to understand nature, to design materials, to make music, perform music, and to learn from spiders. And Tomas will show an amazing video of spider divination and asking questions to spiders that is still being used today in indigenous cultures, which can teach us a lot about communications across species and between species. So I will try to introduce the scope of what a spider web is a little bit in the next minute or so, and then I will hand it over to Tomas and Evan to share additional thoughts, and then we'll have a conversation amongst us while the slides will play. So please share the slides now. We're going to be looking at a spider web. In particular, the interesting spider webs we've been studying are cobwebs, essentially three-dimensional webs that look a little bit different than the typical orb web that you might have seen. If you were asked to draw a web, you would usually draw an orb web, but of course most spider webs are three-dimensional and quite complex. You can see this in this beautiful photo installation that Tomas did a couple of years ago. Yes?
Maybe you could share the screen because it didn't went through. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. Thank you, Tomas. I was getting messages and I was not sure what's going on. I am so sorry. Here we go. Does this work?
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, great. Well, we're essentially, I want to show the title page. This is again just if you want to see the names, so this is all of us and others that have worked on this. And again, we're very excited to be part of this today. So apologies for the screen sharing issue. I think we all have Zoom fatigue a little bit, so things happen. But yeah, so we're looking at spider webs like this beautiful picture here of a web that Tomas created a couple of years ago, a three-dimensional web, which, as I mentioned, is quite different from a 2D web, orb web that we usually see. But those are the kinds of webs we've been studying. And this has been a collaboration between the studio in Berlin, Tomas, Evan, and others at MIT in my lab. And we have had a lot of fun, I would say, over the years. And each of us in the conversation we'll have in the next 10 minutes or so will share our own perspectives and viewpoints and ideas, and we'll hopefully have some interesting synergies between the discussion. But first, I want to just spend a few minutes to introduce the project and what these spider webs are. You can see they have some really interesting structures. Spider webs are an inspiration for us, not only at the visible scale, but also at the invisible scale. This is so how the spider web looks like in the inside. Spider webs are made from proteins, which go all the way down to the nanoscale, things we cannot see, but things that are there, atoms and molecules, and which provide enormous insights for us, for the materials community, as well as for the arts community in learning how the connections actually can work between sound vibrations, which is what the spider lives in, a vibrational universe, all the way to using a web for divination or spider actions as divination, as well as using it as an instrument, which Evan will talk about in a moment. And the connections that are between these different aspects of how nature works is something that this project has worked on. I want to maybe show a little bit of the history of this. So we began, actually, Tomas and I met at MIT a few years ago when he became a resident artist at CAST at MIT. We had a panel together, which in fact actually also allowed us to interest my graduate student, Isabel Su, who worked with me for the past 5 or 6 years on this project. She was in the audience and she loved it so much, this intersection between science and art, that she joined the team. Then Tomas came to MIT and brought a spider, which we're very grateful for. As you could see in the author list, one of the co-authors of this talk is the spider who makes the webs and inspires us things to study and to learn from and become closer to nature and learn this language of how nature creates things and how nature creates sounds and communication. Students have worked on developing a method to scan these webs based on work that Tomas had done originally in Berlin and Germany. We have digitized these webs and created at MIT a way to create graph models of webs, which are digitized versions of the web. This is sort of how it looks like when you fly through the web using lasers. You can then build these models. And once you have a model of these webs, you have these beautiful three-dimensional representations of the original web that live in a computer. And we can do many things with this, including building visualizations, analyzing the structure, the mechanics of the web, failure of the web, as well as looking at different aspects, different sections of the web to understand how structures and functions relate and how the ecology could be mimicked perhaps in 3D printed webs as shown here. So these are mimics that we've made from these webs. And I will hand it over to Tomas, and then Evan, I think you'll come in as well later. We have done a lot of different things with these webs, including created a musical instrument that makes sounds based on treating the web as a harp. Tomas has led the effort around the world in creating a really new way of connecting webs and spiders and humans. And maybe Tomas, I'll hand it over to you here to talk a little about this project.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, could you hear me? It's working.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. No, thank you, Markus, for this beautiful introduction. And yeah, just only say a few words that, yeah, the group Arachnophilia is really very diverse. And it means sometimes we really kind of go through to try to incorporate as many forms of knowledge we could have. If we could move a little bit to the slide where is the diviner, Buehler, in the video that, yes. And we will see now this small video as the start of the introduction. If we could put out the sound, if it's possible. Can you explain? Answer to Markus Buehler question, translation by David.
Okay, so it has chosen the stone, which means it disagrees with Markus's interpretation. It doesn't affirm his statement, his principle, but it is pointing ahead. So there is things ahead of them, which I think in this context means he can develop his principle to make it less wrong. But now, I pose the question the other way around for confirmation.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. This is Buehler from the community of Sommier in Cameroon, and then he's a diviner and who asks a question to spider. He transmits this question through moving a stone through this pen that transmit this vibration to the spider, and the whole village, when they have a kind of very important questions, are asked to the spider, and the spider participate in the organization of the village with their knowledge and their wisdom. So before I traveled there, I asked Markus Buehler, that we share together in the community of Arachnophilia, which question Markus will do. And the question that Markus said is, there is a principle of universal diversity. And so the spider answer is, he disagrees but he had to reformulate the questions to try to make it less wrong, which I thought is very beautiful. This means just a little bit to give you the scope. Also, Emma Enderbell have asked the spider if the current president of America in this time was Donald Trump, will be reelected, and the spider answered that will not be reelected. I mean, what we are looking is a little bit like between science and different form of knowledge, how we can broaden this idea that there are many cultures and many forms of wisdom that already are very much connected to the knowledge and the wisdom of others. And a little bit, to give it a little bit of a context, you know, there is a philosopher, Marisol de la Cadena, do not talk about the Anthropocene, not either about the capital scene, but the anthropo not seen, the human knowledge that is getting extincted, and we are not aware also how much they have been communicated with others. And then I think so everybody was aware that the last year we have heard the words, "I cannot breathe" from George Floyd. This means it seems we have a trouble not only to communicate with animals, but also we have a fundamental problem to communicate among ourselves. I mean, this is a little bit, and maybe we can put again the images if we want to go through. When we invited Evan Ziporyn to play the clarinet, I don't know if we can put that image. For me, something which was astonishing, besides being an amazing composer, he will play, if we can play that image, it will be great. Is Evan in the studio trying to play the clarinet? He's all the time playing. The spider do not move at all. And he keep playing for almost half an hour. And the spider do not react at all. It seems the vibration that the clarinet and the sound that Evan was playing, the spider didn't bother. And then we got almost exhausted after half an hour of playing. And then Evan put the images down below. It's okay there. These are many musicians we have invited to interact with webs and spider and see, to jam together. And in that moment, Evan put the clarinet on the table. And that vibration is what the spider really love it and start to pick up. It means somehow Evan completely forgot about how to play the instrument, but about rubbing it on the tables and start to forget all the knowledge to try to communicate with the vibration mode that the spider maybe was much more attuned. And maybe I leave it, Evan, to you to talk a little bit about this.
I don't think I can do better than that, Tomas, but I will say that I remember that moment very well, and it's actually easy to forget when you don't have that much knowledge. So that was not a problem. But I do remember the process of letting go of will was really more what it had to do with. That I was trying to figure out what the spider might want to hear or might want to say, or how we could make a sound that would sound good together. And then at a certain point, I just let go of that desire. And that's, at least for me, was the subjective experience. Yesterday, one of the questions that we didn't get to answer was, is it a matter of forgetting your human form of thinking? And you pointed out that there's not just one human form of thinking. But I think it's not possible to know whether you're forgetting how to be a human, but I think it's just a matter of being open to what you're receiving and not trying so hard to interpret it, but just reacting and being with it.
Yeah, and I think so something a little bit to give resonance to maybe Evan, what you are talking. I will read a little bit something that Hilton Yapasu and Kevin Lenland have been thought. Spiders appear to offload the cognitive task to their webs, making one of the number of species with a mind that is not fully confined within the head. In truth, this webbed bodies is an extension of the spider own, diffusing its sense and thoughts beyond the shell or its carapace. Through each silk thread, her legs stretch themselves across the ether, and so become sensor membranes of the world. So, too, her minds reach across their tension surface, feeling the pulses that tremble in it. The vibration through which the spider builds a picture of the world beyond. I mean, it's this idea really like, because when sometimes science, and I go to all science museums around the world, they always show the collection of spiders, but not as spider webs. I mean, it's again about this idea of coupling, decoupling the Umwelt, or what Jakob Vox-Huxell always try to understand what is the milieu, and how much our extended body somehow it interrelated with maybe the webs that we are trying to build together with Arachnophilia.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Maybe one other thing that we didn't get to talk about yet, I mentioned at the beginning, is that we have paid attention to the vibrations of these spider webs in different circumstances, and one of the enabled projects that have come out of this collaboration, really across the three teams, I would say, was a project that Evan and Cristina. I see Cristina actually joined us as well. Maybe Evan, Cristina, you can share a little bit about your Arachnophilia implementation in the Arachnodrone, which was using the virtual reality environment of the scanned web as a musical instrument by playing that on stage. And I have a couple of photos. This is one here, and I can cycle through other ones while you speak. So maybe I'll hand it over to Cristina and Evan to discuss that a little bit more.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we only have 1 minute left. But if it's possible to get a blast of sound and image, that would be fantastic.
I'm gonna go, yeah, if you can start talking, and I'll pull up the video, and then we can play that towards the end.
Okay, well, first, Christine was able to join. I'm mindful of the time, and as a result, I just put a web link in the chat, which I don't know if the viewers can watch, but if you go to arachnodrone.com, there's information about this installation as well as video and audio clips. Here's a little bit now. So what you're seeing obviously was inspired in many levels, first of all, by this incredible Certophora spider that Isabel in Markus's studio helped with the scanning and then built a virtual model of, and it was put into Unity game software to create this virtual harp, 13,000 string harp. And the look of it, obviously, as mentioned, is inspired by Tomas, and in fact, this was at a presentation at Tomas's exhibition at the Palais, but also was designed by Christine Southworth, who also performed it. She's here now if she wants to say a little bit about the look for as much time as we have.
So yes, the look, you see the web moving, which is actually the scan of the web turned into basically a game. And then on top of that, we overlaid images of spider webs from around Massachusetts and actually around England, because we were there for a residency. So there's like Tomas's work, there's layers of different spider webs creating what you see. And then the audio, which we can't hear, but you can hear it if you go to the website, is the sound of that web as we're playing it, as we're going through it, and with us improvising. So again, it was improvising with the web, but the web was an instrument on its own.
I'm really sorry. I think we're going to have to leave it there, but please, everyone, the address is already in the chat, and please check it out. It sounds truly amazing project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. And please stay on, for the chat at the end. And now we're over to Lars Chittka from Queen Mary University of London. Do bees sunflowers?
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Let's see. Can you see my presentation now? Great, thank you. All right, so my name's Lars Chittka. I'm a bee psychologist in my day job. I study the sensory systems, the cognition, intelligence, and the emotions of bees. And this is a slightly unusual project for me. I collaborated with an installation artist, Julian Walker, who was at the time interested in evaluating audience responses to paintings in museums. And over a few drinks, we came together to explore how bees might respond to historic paintings. This was presented at a conference on the physics of color, and we decided to stir the pot a little bit with this slightly unusual project. Now, interspecies communication is everywhere in biology. We, the human species, haven't invented such communication. It even exists across plants and animals. So flowers, of course, are communication signals that have an information content. They signal to pollinators the quantity and quality of rewards that the pollinators in turn learn to associate with these signals. But the sensory modalities by which these information contents are conveyed are wholly different from the human realm. So as the poet Cristina pointed out, and other eyes than ours were made to look on flowers. Insect eyes are strange. As you can see, you can't easily relate to them in the way that you can extract perhaps emotional responses from looking into vertebrate eyes. They're strange, but certainly beautiful. And one of the many strange aspects of it is that they extract wholly different sensory contents from the environment. We humans, in terms of color, have blue, green, and red receptors. If you superimpose their sensitivity on the visual, on the spectrum, you can see their sensitivity curves here with maxima in the blue, green, and red. Bees and all other insects, and in fact, many other animals, have an ultraviolet receptor. They're sensitive in a range of electromagnetic radiation where we have no sensitivity whatsoever. However, their long wave receptor is a green receptor, which doesn't extend quite as far into the red as ours does. There's a little BBC clip about our work on UV reflectance. So if I could ask the masterminds of the video presentation. The nectar and the pollen in these flowers is in the center. And these flowers present a kind of bullseye pattern where the periphery is a brightly shining UV signal that can be seen from a distance, whereas the center of the flower absorbs the ultraviolet. And this pattern guides the bee to the center so she can locate the nectar and the pollen there.
It's just amazing what the ultraviolet camera reveals. It shows the secret signals sent by flowers, which guide the bees to the exact place where the nectar is hidden.
All right, thank you. Let's switch back to the main screen. So a little reminder also that there are multiple other sensory differences between insects, bees specifically, and ours. So in addition to seeing ultraviolet, bees can also see polarized light. They have a sensitivity to the Earth's magnetic field. They can respond to electrical signals from flowers, and they can sense petal microstructure. So the world we see is not the objective or the real world. Different animals perceive very different aspects of their environment, typically through filters that they have acquired throughout evolution in line with their lifestyle. So no animal sees a complete or somehow real picture of the physical world around them. So the project with Julian Walker involved presenting bees that had never seen a flower before on their maiden flights, basically, with various paintings. One of them was Vincent van Gogh's Sunflowers. There was Patrick Caulfield's Pottery, Paul Gauguin's A Vase of Flowers, and Fernand Léger's Still Life with a Beer Mug. Sunflowers, by the way, don't actually have a strong or not a pronounced pattern in the ultraviolet, a relatively subtle gradient of UV reflectance in this right picture you can see here taken through a UV filter. So bees responded to these paintings with some enthusiasm. You can see two individuals here having landed in the center of one of the sunflowers. Here is something in the still life with Beer Mug that attracted the interest of bee Red 23, and so on. There's a little video clip, again, if you could play that back, of bees actually responding live to these flowers. So you can see they're landing in the centers of the flowers typically. Again, these are entirely flower naive bees that have never seen flowers before they've been exposed to these paintings. All right, that's enough, I think. Thank you. So in terms of quantities of responses, in terms of approach flights that each of the paintings attracted, Van Gogh's was clearly the most popular. That was also the case in terms of landings on the flowers, which were far fewer. These are the little white bars here. The second highest popularity of actual landings was Gauguin's painting. So this is an overview of these responses, but clearly Van Gogh's sunflowers were the most attractive by these. Now, we ran this project by our audience clearly to provoke thinking about differences in perception and aesthetics and so on. And so we wanted some responses from our audience at that initial conference. Many expressed amusement and thought, well, this is just surreal and absurd. Why are you doing this? Some of the artists at the conference actually felt that the flowers are not intended for bees. Van Gogh's sunflowers are clearly for human audiences. They felt that bees were somehow invading the paintings. Someone said that Van Gogh must have unwittingly captured the essence of a flower in terms of what matters to bees. And we just threw several questions back at our audience, and we'll leave you with these questions. So one is, why is it obvious that flowers rendered by painters should be different from those which have evolved to attract bees? What does all this tell us about the biology of senses and of aesthetic preferences? In what sense do humans have a kind of ownership about flowers created by artificial selection by way of horticulture, or creation through artists? Why is it inappropriate that these should be interacted with by pollinators? And what evolutionary reason might there be for humans' widespread attraction to flowers? So if you enjoy this kind of interface between the sciences and the arts, there's a lot of poetry in the weird world of bees and their interactions with flowers. So I actually have a concept album out on Bandcamp entitled Strange Flowers. So have fun with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lars. That is really fascinating. And I gather you also have a track called I Stung Gwyneth Paltrow. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So we have to hear that too. Okay, well, next up is from Clare Brooks at Google Arts and Culture, and Cristina Tarquini. And I think we have a video now on the heartbeat of the earth.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for the invitation to this very important discussion and conversation. I'm Clare Brooks, and I'm joined by Cristina Tarquini, a digital artist from Italy, who I've collaborated with many times in the past. And we will be taking a deep dive into the Mediterranean Sea with her a bit later. But first, I wanted to introduce you to Google Arts and Culture Experiments as a Google Arts and Culture Lab. And we collaborate with experts, creatives, curators, artists, scientists, and educators to help craft new bridges between technology and culture. And Heartbeat of the Earth is a program that I lead at Google Arts and Culture Lab, in which we're collaborating across disciplines with artists, creative coders, designers, and scientists. And we're focusing on one of today's most pressing issues, which is climate change. Why art? Art has always been a medium to convey complex subjects and address challenges that we face. Artists are often also thinking 10 years ahead. Art is about connecting with people's emotions. It's personal, and at the same time, it's universal. I believe that commissioning and collaborating with an artist is based on trust and truth, especially when focusing on topics that have an impact on society and the world at large. When topics are too remote, too explosive, and too complicated for us to comprehend, then I believe that this is when it's our responsibility to reach out to artists who will take this challenge to connect with people's emotions. For many of us, the term climate data conjures up images of complicated graphs and charts, but artists are explaining it through a new lens. As you see here, these are some of the artworks, or actually all of the artworks that are part of Heartbeat of the Earth. The artists that you see here are all those who also collaborated on an artwork for the program. And more artists are in fact taking steps in doing research in scientific fields, and so opening up the dialogue for an interesting bridge between science and art. By striving to move away from our anthropocentric views, artists can also create the bridge between our understanding of the world and other species' understanding, be it animals, plants, or any element that surrounds us, visible or not. And we believe that technology can play a part in this and be a powerful vehicle to engage audiences and help the intangible become tangible. Through Heartbeat of the Earth, which is an artist residency at Google Arts and Culture Lab that we launched with the UNFCCC, the climate change, the artist collaborations translate complex climate science and allow us to experience hard data through the senses. By merging art and technology, we can create a new way of understanding science. And we collaborated with the artists to turn their proposals into artworks. Now we'll take a deep dive into one particular experimental artwork and fruitful collaboration, which is Medusae by Cristina Tarquini. We'll look at how a collaboration between artists, technology, and scientists can open up the interspecies dialogue and allow us to see what jellyfish can teach us about climate change. I'll hand over to Cristina to briefly introduce the artwork.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you very much for having us. Yes, so my name is Cristina Tarquini, and together with Claire and Google Arts and Culture, we created Medusae, which is an interactive web data visualization that focuses on jellyfish species, and in particular jellyfish blooms in the Mediterranean seas, to understand the changing climate. The Mediterranean is an area that's very dear to me, but also is considered the cradle of Western civilization. But unfortunately, even though it's so important, unfortunately, it's warming at one of the fastest paces in the world.
It is. So you're probably asking yourselves, why focus on jellyfish? Actually, one of the key points that drew me to your proposal, Cristina, was this new way of seeing or understanding this creature that most people would probably call pest or a nuisance to most swimmers, going on holiday in the summer. But it's actually a marvel full of clues to you.
Yeah, definitely. For me, jellyfish are amazing. Like it's surprising that for me, it's surprising at least that people look at jellyfish as you were saying, the pests, the weeds of the ocean, just an aggressive, invasive species that just ruins your day at the end of the day. And if we look at them as being really the lowest class in the animal kingdom. But of course, this is just a truly anthropocentric view. And if you ask me, also a very egoistic one. And not only towards jellyfish, but also how we perceive animal in general. But to me, jellyfish are really special because they've been on this planet for more than 670 million years. So they're much older than dinosaurs, and they've been here for the oldest living creature that has been on this planet. And during this amount of time, they've adapted to live in such special conditions. So for example, they become transparent, which in the ocean is extremely important because it means that they can hide in plain sight. Or for example, they learn how to live forever. There's some jellyfish that if left undisturbed, they never dies. And so they have these special skills that, for me, it makes them just marvelous. And of course, it's not actually just to me. They have also influenced and inspired many fields like robotics, genetics, and chemistry, for example.
Definitely. And there's one really fun fact that you also taught me during the project.
Yeah, definitely. There is thanks to the bioluminescence of jellyfish, a scientist won a Nobel Prize. So it's as if a jellyfish itself won a Nobel Prize.
That's brilliant. Also, during the collaboration process, we were constantly meeting and feeding back to each other on the different ways of approaching the topic. And we decided upon focusing on the climate issues in relation to the jellyfish instead of doing a deep dive in the specific species themselves. Because this actually enabled a broader and more open educational element to the artwork, so that we could view these creatures as less of a foe and more of a hero of the story.
Yeah, definitely. Climate change affects jellyfish differently than other fish species, the other marine species. In fact, for example, acidifying waters do not harm their jelly. Instead, they harm other fish. Rising temperatures are not yet an harm to them. The lack of oxygen doesn't find itself as a problem. Jellyfish can live in waters where there's little or no oxygen at all. And the fact that we've basically overfished all their predators just allow them to thrive in our seas. So as you, Claire, were saying, definitely they aren't the antagonists of the story. We are just doing the work for them. And over the years, as I grew up in Italy, I've definitely seen their number increasing. And the more I've done my research, the more I've seen that they actually serve a clue to the changing climate. Today, we talk very much about data visualization, so making numbers visuals and pretty and understandable by everybody. But I think jellyfish blooms are a natural data visualization. It's almost as if nature is doing this to give us a sign, a clue. So then in the experience, we divided into climate chapters so that user can discover jellyfish species, but also understand what's happening to the Mediterranean Sea.
And then also, interestingly, the research I've made prior to the collaboration had drawn me to some really interesting studies that transform jellyfish into part of the solution instead of being the problem. Because the important message that we wanted to present was a conclusion that was more hopeful than doomful. And so ending with a positive note on the species was kind of paramount to our call to action. Perhaps, Cristina, you could very quickly tell us more about what these creative solutions are.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in Italy, this is something that I'm really proud of. There's a lot of creative solution using jellyfish. For example, there's a lot of scientists that are now turning themselves into chefs because they are trying to tackle the problem of having so many jellyfish in the sea and less food that can be put on the table. And so they're looking at transforming jellyfish in really delicious food. Or there is this other very interesting project that is looking at using jellyfish mucus to gather microplastic from the sea. As we all know, microplastic and plastic is an environmental crisis that is as big, if not bigger, climate change. And so this is all very, very interesting. And yes, as you were saying, Claire, we wanted to keep it open to creative solutions.
Definitely. And I also wanted to bring a very important point to the fore of the experience was the importance of the scientific corroboration in all of these artworks. And Cristina collaborated very closely with Fabien Lombard from the Laboratoire d'Océanographie de Villefranche-sur-Mer on all the topics and research mentioned. And you can also see the data sources used here on this slide. Thank you so much, Cristina, for allowing us to see jellyfish in a positive light and for taking us on this beautiful deep dive into the Mediterranean Sea. I'm available for live questions after this talk, so see you all soon.
Thank you.
Hi there. Well, that was fantastic. I'm very lucky right now. I'm by the Mediterranean Sea, and one of the favorite things we love to do is go and look at the bioluminescence at nighttime. But anyway, unfortunately, we don't have Claire and Cristina with us, but we will try and pass on any questions to them for anyone who has some specific questions for their work. I have one here for Lars. Could you test how the bees might respond to these same paintings in gray values to see if they also responded to just the form?
They will do, yes, but it depends on which part of the response you're evaluating. So attraction from a distance and detection of flowers is done with just a single color receptor type, the green receptor, and that's therefore a color-blind channel. Once they're closer to the flowers and recognizing them from memory, they use the entire color spectrum and actually use predominantly color over intensity.
Fantastic. And now to the spider team. Is there a specific instrument's vibration that the spiders seem to prefer or react more to in your studio or studies? Sorry.
Tomas has had so many musicians playing with his spiders that he might be able to answer that more broadly. In my own experience, I didn't think it was so much about vibration, I was playing one instrument, which is bass clarinet, but it was more about I wasn't so much thinking about frequency vibration. Bass clarinet has a particular sound envelope that's pretty distinctive. It basically replicates a square wave. So that's cool. But it was more had to do with the way I was playing. I was thinking about my own vibration. I don't mean that in a new age sense, but just literally my own motion and what I know about the spider, what I was hearing from the spider. But I only did it that one time. So, Tomas, do you have more to say? Is he still with us?
I just wanted to note, so when we were at the Palais de Tokyo, we had a spider in the room. So we were playing and we had surround sound. We had, I think it was 4 speakers and a subwoofer. We may have had additional subwoofers. So when we played low, that spider actually felt it in her web. And she was just on the other side of the room. So I think the low vibrations, I mean, I think it was actually the vibrations rather than the sound. I mean, sound is vibration, but it was the vibrations that she was reacting to, and she could actually feel what we were making.
But let me just say 2 quick things about that. First of all, you know, as humans, we give ourselves the right to react to music without moving. We can move or we don't have to move. So all we can know is whether we're seeing the spider or measuring the spider reacting doesn't mean she's not thinking about it. But also, I will say that Tomas himself did film the spider that was in the room with us while we were playing. So we can put that question to him later.
Yeah, and can spiders moonwalk? Anyway, sorry.
They can moonwalk
with.
They got They have 8 legs.
Yeah, they can do lots more with it.
Yeah.
So are there plans to further spider research in a more natural controlled environment using plants native to the spider's habitat?
Hello, Peter.
Hi,
there he is.
Tomas.
Yes, no, absolutely. One thing, Peter, is always like what we discussed a little bit yesterday. It's very natural for a spider also to weave a web in the corner of a house. And this means, they have these animals which are synanthropic. This means they don't have this kind of Western division of, that the corner of a house, which is 90 degrees, is less natural than the branch of a tree. They don't have that extension. You know what I mean? This is why I think so. To a certain extent, we have to maybe revision this idea where nature starts and ends to a certain extent. But yes, of course, we observe them in, usually every time we go to a museum, we watch all where spiders live in the museum, right? And this means you can find them everywhere.
No, I love the idea that you talked about the web becoming an extension of the body. And I was just wondering, if it was a new type of architecture where we could connect our houses in the same way to our senses. Anyway, that's diversion.
Maybe
Markus.
we can add to this a little bit. We actually started studying webs out in nature, and I put a little link in the chat as well. The challenge is when you have natural webs, from a science perspective, it's very difficult to understand exactly the parameters and measure the web. And so we actually, in this collaboration with Tomas, we moved webs from nature in situ studying there into the lab, which allowed us to do a lot of things like the scanning and the virtual reality and ultimately music and all these things in a much more controlled way. But I do think it's very interesting if you go out to nature and study webs. We, in this paper that I posted, we actually discovered that the architecture and the material and the way it's built is very closely linked, very different from current architecture, where as an architect and engineer, you take a material off the shelf, basically, and you build around that material. The spider is able to control the material itself.
Look at this, it's kind of follow, man.
What was that, Tomas?
Yeah, no, I could not, I don't know, Peter, if was here my answer before.
It was a little broken up, but I think we got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. There's a question from Vint saying octopuses have huge neural structure in their arms to manage them independently. What do we know about spider neurostructure?
Yes. I don't know, Markus, if you want to answer.
No, please go ahead.
No, but yes, I think so. It's very thoughtful, the relationship, in relationship of this, what we said before, of offloading the capacity of the thinking through the web. For example, when you have a spider which is not able to weave a web, she will not eat at all. And until she don't complete and is able to weave kind of the mouse for where she will be able to sense then what she will be eating, she will not eat until she don't weave the web. This means is somehow she really kind of build this kind of embody or extend the cognition through the web. And it's part of the brain. And also, for example, the tension that they put in the lines, it depends how much hungry is the spider. This means if there is a lot of tension in the web, she will tension it a lot. Even a small prey will be able to be sensed. When she's already fed and is not so hungry, the tension of the threads are much more loose. This is small prey will not be able to be sensed by the spider. This means it's really this idea of thinking that the brain is not confined the way of thinking is not confined to the brain.
Yeah, and maybe
build and weave all the time.
And adding to this is an interesting thing that actually the silk that's used to make the web itself has some built-in responsiveness. So for example, if you take spider silk and you expose it to moisture, the silk will actually compress and create tension by itself. And so there's sort of an additional component of not only the web as a living material, but also the material itself has built-in mechanisms to respond to the environment, such as moisture, and basically stiffen up and tension, create additional tension. So it's an amazing ecosystem, I think, from many perspectives.
Yeah, I was always fascinated by the well-known photos of the webs that were constructed on different drugs and how different they were. Do you think that was in some way a sort of a representation? Is the web in some way mapping brain activity in that way?
Yeah, Peter, there is a beautiful sample of a wasp. It's called the zombie spider, which hijacked the brain of the spider. And then the spider starts to build a web, which is not anymore her archetypical type of web, but to build a web to host the babies of the wasp, which were put in the body of the spider. This means it's really this kind of hijacking the brain by another animal, and then the spider starts to build a completely different web that it's used to do. This means this idea also when we were talking about how spiders are affected by different types, and I will mention how much pollution is affected on the web also. This is why I have been displaced from, because they are proteins, as Markus said, they eat the web. When they eat all the black carbon and the soot and the pollution, which is in the air, they deposit on the web, then they die also. And they're really affected by pollution.
Wow. I think, we're coming to a close to the break, but is there anything else anyone would like to add? Lars, do you have anything about where you think things might be in 10 years or where you'd like them to be?
Well, I think as we're learning more about the psychology of even very small-brained animals, we're increasingly starting to think about the ethical implications that come with that. There are currently no legal restrictions, for example, on invasive experimentation with insects. So experimental scientists can drill electrodes of any number into their brains without any kind of anesthetic and so on. And of course, well, you might be aware of the plight of many insects, including bees in nature. And people are aware that we need to conserve bees because we need them to pollinate our crops and so on. But I think with the increasing insights into their psychology, there are also ethical concerns with killing insects on a large scale and or subjecting them to laboratory treatments in the manner that is currently the case. So I'd like that to change. Okay, fantastic. I think we're pretty much out of time and ready for the break, but it's been really amazing session, and I think there's plenty for all of us to think about, and I hope everyone will go and check these projects on their own websites, and I'm sure we'll have the links in interspecies.io. Just wanted to thank all of you for giving up your time and inspiring us. So amazing session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We've got a 15-minute break, I believe now.